The first time Clara Whitmore, the youngest billionaire single mother in the city, noticed the janitor was not because he was sweeping the marble floor of her corporate tower with quiet precision, but because he was kneeling beside her son, Leo, tying the boy's shoelaces with a gentleness she hadn't seen from anyone in years. Clara froze near the elevator, her designer heels rooted to the floor, watching this stranger in a faded blue uniform smile at her child as if the world wasn't constantly demanding something from him. Leo laughed, a sound so rare these days that Clara's chest tightened, and the janitor said something soft that made the boy nod seriously, like it was the most important advice he'd ever received. Clara cleared her throat, and the janitor looked up, startled, standing quickly and apologizing as if he'd committed a crime. His name was Ethan. He had calm eyes, the kind that didn't judge, didn't beg, didn't calculate. Over the following weeks, Clara noticed him more, how he worked late, how he refused tips, how he always made time to say hello to Leo, who had stopped speaking much after his father's death. Clara's life was a fortress of wealth, lawyers, board meetings, and loneliness, and yet this janitor moved through it like someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. One night, after a brutal board meeting where investors whispered about her fragile emotional state, and hinted she needed a husband to stabilize her image, Clara broke down in her office, the city lights blurring through tears. Her marriage had ended in betrayal, her husband's sudden death had left scars the tabloids never let heal, and now there were rumors she might lose control of the empire she built. As she stepped out to get air, she saw Ethan mopping the hallway, humming quietly. Without planning to, she spoke, and once she started, she couldn't stop. She told him everything. About the pressure, the loneliness, the fear of losing her son to a world that only saw money. Ethan listened without interrupting, without pity. When she finished, embarrassed by her own vulnerability, she tried to laugh it off, but instead, something inside her snapped. Her voice shook as she said the words that would change both their lives forever. "Please, marry me." The hallway fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Ethan stared at her, stunned, the mop slipping slightly in his hand. Clara explained through tears that it would be a contract marriage, temporary, just enough to silence the board, protect her son, and give her time to breathe. She offered money, cars, a house, everything wealth could buy. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window, looked out at the city, then back at her, and when he finally spoke, his voice was steady but carried a weight she hadn't expected. "I'll marry you," he said, "but not for your money." Clara's heart leapt, but then he added words that shocked her far more than a refusal ever could. "In return, I want you to treat me like an equal, let me raise your son as a real father, and when this is over, you must choose me, not because you need saving, but because you love me, or walk away forever." Clara realized in that moment that the janitor wasn't asking for riches. He was asking for truth. And as the screen fades here, dear viewers, remember, sometimes the greatest love stories begin where pride ends. If you're feeling this story, subscribe now, because what happens next will change everything. The wedding was small but explosive in the media, headlines screaming about the billionaire who married a janitor, analysts laughing on television, betting on how long it would last. Clara expected shame, regret, even resentment, but what she didn't expect was peace. Ethan moved into her mansion. Quietly, fixing things himself instead of calling staff, cooking meals Leo actually ate, reading bedtime stories with silly voices that made the boy talk again, laugh again, live again. At first, Clara kept emotional distance, reminding herself this was an arrangement, but Ethan never crossed boundaries, never demanded affection, never reminded her of the deal. He simply showed up, every day, in a way no one else ever had. When investors tried to humiliate him at a gala, Ethan calmly defended Clara with intelligence that stunned the room, revealing he'd once been a civil engineer who walked away from a corrupt firm that tried to bribe him, choosing dignity over millions. Clara saw the respect in people's eyes shift instantly. But the real test came when her late husband's brother filed for custody of Leo, claiming Clara was unstable and manipulated by a con artist janitor. In court, lawyers attacked Ethan's past, his job, his worth. Clara was prepared to fight with money, but Ethan stopped her. He stood before the judge and spoke from the heart, not about wealth or power, but about being chosen by a child who needed safety, about cleaning floors by day and broken souls by night, about loving without ownership. Then Leo did something no one expected. He stood up and said, "That's my dad. He listens to me." The courtroom fell silent. Clara broke down, realizing she had already made her choice long before the contract expired. After the case was won, she found Ethan packing his things. The contract period was over. He told her he would leave now, so she could decide freely. Panic surged through her. For the first time in her life, Clara begged, not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of love. She told him she didn't need a janitor, a savior, or a shield for her empire. She needed him. Ethan smiled, tears in his eyes, and asked only one question: is this still a deal, or is this forever? Clara answered by taking his hand and placing it over her heart. Years later, when Clara stepped down as CEO by choice, she credited her husband, not for saving her company, but for teaching her how to live. And as this story ends, remember this: love doesn't ask what you have, it asks who you were years past. Yet the story of the billionaire who married a janitor refused to fade, because what people saw from the outside never matched what was quietly unfolding inside the Whitmore household. Clara's empire continued to thrive even after she stepped down as CEO, but for the first time, success was no longer measured by stock prices or headlines. It was measured by morning breakfasts where Leo talked endlessly about school, by evenings where Ethan and Clara sat on the porch without phones, sharing silence that felt safe instead of empty. Ethan never returned to janitorial work, not because he was ashamed of it, but because Clara encouraged him to finish what he'd once abandoned, using his engineering skills to build affordable housing for workers who were invisible to the wealthy world Clara once ruled. When his nonprofit began gaining attention, critics accused him of using Clara's money to polish his image, but Ethan responded by publicly refusing donations tied to influence, earning respect the hard way. Then came the night that tested everything again. A massive fire broke out in one of the city's poorest districts, destroying dozens of homes. While politicians argued and cameras waited,